Fontaine, and you're listening to the HomeBuyers Hour on WCPT AM 820, where the facts matter. And I want to thank everybody who's listening, and especially those that are going to be watching live. If you are on any of our streams, we do record this on Wednesday mornings at 10. Feel free to type in any questions that you have, and hopefully one of our experts are going to be here to answer these for you. In the studio with us, I got a 15-year veteran in real estate. He's part of Keller Williams' team. Personally, I got great respect for this guy, even though we've never really worked together, and I'm giving him an evil eye right now. But he does believe in treating people the right way, and that's why he's here. His name is Ryan Casper. Ryan, if you don't mind, give us a quick lowdown on who you are, your team, and a little bit about, tell us a little bit about Keller Williams.
Well, as you said, 15-year veteran in the downtown Chicago market. I've been with Keller Williams only about a year and a half. Great experience. Love the models. Love the systems. Got a small team of three. I focus really 100% of my time with sellers. I've got a buyer's agent, and my lovely bride is the administrative office manager expert. Really brains of the operation. And just looking to implement some new systems for next year.
And Ryan, how do people get hold of you if they want to talk to you or have any questions after this show?
Well, considering we have to communicate the way they want to, there's countless ways these days, text, email, but I would say my office line is 312-888-9395, and my lovely bride will help you out.
Outstanding. Also in the studio with us, we have my favorite real estate attorney of all times. His name is Patrick Loftus. Patrick, give us a little shout out to somebody special and tell us how people get hold of you and why you are my favorite.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say hi to my lovely bride because, she's going to watch this and she's going to say, well, he said hi to his wife. And so I love you, sweetheart. Switching topics.
I threw a curveball at you. I love it.
Well, you did, but that's okay. I'm ready. Don't forget to gently caress the like button. You can also gently caress the subscribe button and enable alerts. If you need to talk to me, you can call or text 773-632-8330.
Sounds good. And then remotely, we have my favorite, and everybody's always my favorite if you haven't figured it out by now, but we have my favorite mortgage broker of the Federal Savings Bank. His name is Joey Matthews. And Joey, I always like to, well, first of all, how do people get hold of you? And then give us an update what's going on in the mortgage world and finances, and maybe throw out a prediction or two, what you think is going to be happening in the next few months.
Yep, Joey Matthews, the VA loan nerd, NMLS run through 30694. You could reach me at 630-235-2405 or across all social media at the VA loan nerd. Literally all of it. In the world of rates or MBS trading and bond trading, there's really nothing going on this week. It's a pretty dead week for the economic calendar. We had pending home sales come in. This morning, they came in significantly lighter than expected. Shocker. Last month, November, we actually beat expectations in new home sales, which is a positive indicator. And I actually believe that we're going to see a strong Q1. I believe Q2 will be even stronger.
Now, when you say that, do you mean new home sales or existing home sales? You think it's going to be stronger?
I'm sorry, existing home sales. New home sales, we'll see what happens. But existing home sales, I think we're in for a stronger than expected Q1 and definitely a stronger Q2, because I do believe that we will see rates improve, and all those buyers that put themselves on the sideline are going to jump all over it. The 10-year Treasury yield.
Hold on, I'm going to stop you a little bit because you're getting me all excited in here and stuff. Do you have a guess? I mean, right now I'm seeing the billboard saying 6 something for a 30-year fixed. What are you guessing that's going to be?
I think I believe in Q2 we'll start seeing a drop, but it will get lower through the end of the year. That's my guess. Okay. I believe by the end of the year we will be probably mid-low 5s. That's just me. At the same time, I'm not Nostradamus. I don't pretend to be, but that's just kind of what I see based on my belief that the Fed has significantly overcorrected on the Fed funds rate. I believe they are losing their minds, and will eventually reap the benefits after we go through a ton of pain.
You said that really fast, but you know what? With everything, it's got to hurt a little bit. Isn't that the key?
I don't think it's going to need to hurt as much as it's going to, but that's Jerome Powell being a hawk. He is the hawkish hawk of all hawks.
We do have a listener question for you, Joey. He's talking about when will the overinflated housing market correct? And Ryan, you too, don't be afraid to jump in on this. This goes to both of you guys. Is anyone willing to say the correction is coming?
Is anyone? So for me, it's hard to say that there's some significant. There's so many people that believe there's some significant correction coming.
Joey, do you mind?
Yeah.
Perhaps we should define a term, which is what do we mean by correction?
Very good.
Because you've got a small percentage of the population that I think is seeing a bubble, which I don't think exists, in my amateur opinion. But what? So let's talk. First, tell me what is meant by correction, at least as insofar as you consider it, so that we are kind of all on the same page here.
Are we talking to me or KJEL?
Yes.
Right now we're talking to you and Ryan, because the way I see this is that question for correction is more so going after interest rates, where Ryan, I want you talking about more or less the amount of transactions that are happening.
Well, transactions are going to be down from 2021, 22, and 23. We're going to see about 10% drops in overall transactions, number of homes sold.
Now, is that fair to say that it's actually going to be a drop, or is it more, or is it fairer to say that 21 and 22 was pretty high, and that was unusually high, and now we're coming back to a normal?
Right, and as I said during breakfast this morning, I appreciated the data you brought out, which again, the data is really all that matters, or all we really should be looking at. And as your graph showed, 2017 to 2020, we were at 5.5 million transactions nationwide. It was a completely flat number year over year. Now, did it spike to 6.5 million over the last couple of years during COVID? Great, so we're up 20%. Well, then we saw it plunge in the last 6 months, and we're projected to do 4.5. So in terms of corrections and bubbles, transactions, okay, fine, activity's down. The question is, who's that really hurting other than realtors? I mean, what does the average homeowner really care about? They care about
selling their house.
Well, selling their house, but really what kind of money they're going to get for it, right? And to touch on the correction, I mean, again, the data I brought for 2022, which obviously isn't 100% in yet since we have 5 days left in the year, or 4 days, but we're at a 6% appreciation rate for 2022.
That's not bad.
Well, it's historically 50% higher than 4, which can we agree? It's about 4.42 annually. And in Chicago, that's what it's been. Now, are we seeing a correction from COVID 2020 and 2021? Well, if we were seeing 10% appreciation rates, which, by the way, nationally are super low, but for Chicago, they're almost triple or 2.5 times what they normally are. So is 6% lower than 10? Yeah, of course. Well, that's what exactly the correction statistically or numerically we're talking about. And so is 6% still better than the average year? Yeah, a lot. But it's just not what we were doing the last 2. Right. So I think we all need to be let's just say grateful during this holiday season and take our 6% and be happy with it.
No, and I get it. And then, but going back to what Joey and the corrections that Patrick brought up, when, I get it. We were going through massive inflation. You hear about other countries in the world and their inflations have skyrocketed. So we got to keep inching up those interest rates, and that's what the federal government did. The days of zero interest and our mortgages being 2 are gone. All right. And now as they go up, and Joey, you've mentioned this a few different times, you're going to go up, go up, go up. But then all of a sudden, we're going to start pushing us into a little bit of a recession. And I think that's the pain that you were talking about. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, it is.
All right. And most of the stuff that we talk about is going to be in the Chicagoland market. That's where our radio station's located at. And it sounds like KJ, and thank you, by the way, for chiming in and giving us those questions. It looks like he's on the coast, and he came back with all coasts are dropping like a rock. So why does your guest say otherwise? As an investor, I don't see it. And I don't know if I answered that question or not, but he's an investor and he's talking about the coast cities dropping. What do you say as a rebuttal to that?
The coast cities dropping. I mean, I can tell you right now, I was in Cape Coral, Florida, just a week ago, which I realize is an extreme case considering what just happened.
Right.
But you go Southern California, Texas, Southern Florida. I mean, they just see bigger swings than we do.
Correct.
I mean, at the end of the day, like Chicago, just generally on a national level, you can call it stable. You can call it boring. It just is.
I like boring.
It's stable.
Yeah, that's the good thing that comes with it.
But when the people are comparing, say, their home in Chicago versus their second home in Florida, and they're getting 25% returns on Florida and only 10 here, they think Chicago's a weak market. Fine. Call it whatever you want. But it's not. You're not seeing the drops you are in those markets either.
Yeah, the ebbs and flows are just different, and I think it's important to recognize what I think is pretty well established, which is that real estate is an extremely local industry. So, if you want, you can pick your poison. If you want to really have some fun with your money and be risky, take it out west to Vegas, take it to the coast. You could probably get a better ROI just overall, but as Ryan said, and I think that the numbers, he's a very data-driven fella, and the numbers suggest that this market here in Chicago is a more stable market. You're not going to necessarily see a 25% appreciation on a parcel of real estate. I mean, I can give you an example of a friend who bought a place in Las Vegas in the middle of 2020 and sold it last year, and well, made a lot of money. But okay, so that's not something that generally happens here. But again, it's stable. If you don't like a ton of risk, bring that coastal money here to Chicago. We will be happy to help you invest it.
Yeah, average sales price in Vegas. I was just there not too long ago. Average sales price in Vegas before COVID, $350. After COVID, $550. Those are the numbers.
That is amazing. And one of the things, I was having a conversation with our godson. He lives out in San Francisco, and he was telling me how expensive it is to live out there. You know, a 1,700 square foot home, and they're looking at around $2 million is what he's telling me out in that general area. So I think it's going back to the same thing what we noticed here. 2 years, everything goes up, but then all of a sudden when it comes back down, now you also add in the slow season, which it seems like around Christmas, New Year's, and for me, and this is just my own personal experience, it stays this slow until roughly about February 1st. My stupid analogy on that is going to be people start getting income tax refunds, and that's kind of what sparks people buying things.
Super Bowl. Everyone knows the spring market kicks off with the Super Bowl, so I just chill. January is always a nice, calm month. I use the word always. I'm not supposed to do that. I'm a lawyer. Almost always. And then it's like rain, man. It just all of a sudden, we find out who the Super Bowl champion is, and that Monday morning, it's like, oh, I guess I've got to start working again.
One thing I'll just touch on seasonal stuff is Zillow, truly all the major websites see their highest level of search activity during the holidays. Well,
really?
Why is that? Well, people are sitting on their butts doing nothing, hanging out with family, taking time off of work, but still shopping real estate. So over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, I think most agents can say that Super Bowl actually has even been potentially moved up 30 days. As if to say, I'll see listings get no activity in December. I'll get 4, 5, 6 showings in the first week of January. It's like somebody flips a switch sometimes.
And the data here, again, I don't want to, keep hammering on that, but I mean, that's the stuff you can really sink your teeth into, because everything else is just sort of, well, I think, I hope, I want, I reckon. The numbers, they don't lie.
No, they don't. And let's get on to that subject right now. Ryan, I value your knowledge, and part of these conversations we have is you're unique on getting data for accurate pricing of homes and getting people up there. You're nodding your head no.
Well, yes and no sometimes. I'll continue with the question, though.
All right. I want to be educated. Teach me on, how you go about and do this, and why you do it and how it benefits your client.
Well, typically, obviously, as a professional, we all go through a series of questions to see where people are at with the process, where they're at with their next step, their next moves, right? So the advice we talked about CMAs this morning at breakfast, and yeah, that's now information. Well, I'm thinking about doing something 12, 18, 24 months from now.
Why so far out?
Well, that's my decision or my what I need in my life, right? So
Okay.
what changes today are going to affect me 12, 18 months from now when I'm thinking about doing this, right?
And
that going to help
who
me
is
make my
I?
decision?
Is I you or is I a seller?
As a seller or homeowner.
Okay.
Or even buyer for that matter, right? Like, again, the conversations between sellers and buyers are simply flipped, right? What is your motivation? What's the important part of doing this? And how can we use the data, right, over the last 90 days, quarter, annual, COVID for that matter, to apply it to what your needs are, right? And whether it be investment, whether it be personal, personal use, whatever it might be. So using that information to advise people beyond what your home is worth right this minute is, I think, super valuable, and what I think most realtors need to take the time to do, and I do it on a monthly basis, to look at the macro data, micro data, whatever that is for that individual, and apply it to the conversation.
And where do you get that information from?
I mean, most agents, I'm sure listening on this radio interview, we're going to say the MLS is probably the best place to go for micro information. InfoSparks is another part of our MLS, and then a handful of others, agent metrics and broker metrics, where really more for the big companies, more of like macro data, but you can pull information from just any specific area. And when you're having that conversation with that person, have you looked at that information and have you looked at the data to advise them properly, or, I guess with real information rather than just some little one-off experience you had last week on a listing and a story? You've got to apply to it.
And what sort of information are you trying to get for your client too?
Well, really the information I'm pulling is how to best advise them. But if there's 5 market data points that I pull every single month on the first of the month just to look at year over year, and I dump into a spreadsheet, is really active listings,
Okay.
closed sales or number of transactions,
Okay.
expired listings, right? How many listings were on the market here? Fun fact that 40% of the inventory that goes on the MLS never sells.
That is a
4 out of
very
10.
high number.
Yeah.
40.
40%.
That's
Meaning
a high
6
number.
out of 10 people are successful, 4 out of 10 ain't. Days on market, which even in the last 12 months in Chicago, and again, this is the whole city, right? I know there's probably people out there who go, oh, well, I want to hear about Lincoln Park. No, this is the entire city of Chicago, just city proper. Days on market was 70 a year ago. Today it's 64.
That's actually faster.
If we're in a soft market, then why are days on market dropping? And then the last I pull is just average sales price, right? What is the average home selling for in Chicago year over year? And those are the numbers that I'm pulling, and a few others monthly. And then I can look over the trends I started doing this in 2018. So I can look at year over year trends, quarter trends, seasonal stuff, and talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. You're proactively pulling those numbers. And what that suggests to me is that you're you're able to see the signal rather than the noise. The noise being the chatter, what's going on. You turn on whatever your favorite news outlet is, and you're getting, at best, similar data but filtered through someone else's lens. Whereas by proactively going out and getting that data, you can then see what's going on. You can see behind what the headline is, which I think is really valuable.
I mean, here's the question we should all be asking. Like, if people are getting national data, which ropes into markets like Vegas, Florida, Southern California, should that information be applied to a Chicago conversation? Well, that would be stupid, wouldn't it?
I would agree.
Right?
But that would also be the same thing if you took Lakeview or Lincoln Park and compared that down to Woodlawn.
So then why are real estate professionals using national data or any data that they see on a website, right? And I think part of this conversation we started was clickbait conversation.
Right. They have an agenda, right?
Why are you using stuff that was simply there to get your attention? Now you're applying it to daily use and advising people on their biggest life decisions or financial decisions. I mean, for the fact that you're using Facebook posts to advise people on 80%, 82% of their equity, I mean, I think some people would call that malpractice, wouldn't it? So
I'm not going to touch that one real quick,
that-
but I see where
that's
you're
a
coming
word
from.
That's a word that's very difficult for me to hear, to be honest.
well, I'm glad I'm speaking with a lawyer about this. Good. Give me your feedback on that.
I would probably say that, right before we went on air, we were talking about the difference between influence and manipulation. And, according to you, who I view as a reputable source, it's basically the motivation, which is, are you trying to use data to mislead someone to do something, or are you trying to use data to convince them to do something that I suppose is in their interest in some way?
Yeah.
So, and I'd like to take it even that next step as the home inspector in the group. And we've had this conversation before. People constantly ask me, well, is this something, you tell me the roof is, 3/4 into its lifespan. Can I ask them to get me a new roof? And I hate telling my client this, but I say, I don't know. And this is where we need to bring the real estate agent in there as the advisor, because, and I hate using the you when pointing fingers, but what leverage my client has. You know the value of that property. You know that compared to what they paid for it. You know how hot the market is. I mean, if we're going back to 2008 and somebody wants to ask for $15,000 for a new furnace and their firstborn child, they're going to get it. All right. But if we go back last year, if you ask for $15 for a new furnace, they're going to move on to the next buyer that comes in there.
Yeah, they're going to be like, I got an all cash buyer at 10 grand higher. So, see ya. I mean, it's sort of a caricature of what that market was. But
And before you answer that, I want to go around the horn real quick. Patrick, how do people get hold of you if they have questions?
call or text 773-632-8330.
And Joey, how do they get hold of you?
You can call or text at
There's always music.
630-235-2405. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, I love it.
Well, I want my own background.
Yeah, I want my background music too.
Was that Sinatra? That was nice.
It was Sinatra. So my name is Charlie Belfontaine. I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. Our website is www.thehomeinspectors. That's plural. That's an ORS, and it's a .com. Our phone number is 312-544-9180. If anyone's interested in joining the home inspection profession. We also own Home Inspection University of Illinois, and that website is HIUIL.com. And most of our classes on there are for free. And we're always trying to put more unique stuff like what we're talking about here on there as well that we get from other professionals. And Ryan, how do they get hold of you?
My direct office line is 312-888-9395.
All right. And now, if my short-term memory that's failing me, let's see who else here has that memory. What were we talking about the leverage that clients have? And
You were mentioning, right, you were playing, for example, a roof situation where somebody would ask for, let's just say, an absurd credit beyond what the cost of the roof repair would actually be, and how would a seller deal with that or respond to that? I mean, I will say on behalf of real estate agents, I don't think you need to do a ton of transactions to kind of get a sense of the market. If you do 5, 10, 15 deals a year, you can kind of see how negotiations went. As if to say, if a seller is asking $400,000 and let's say the buyer comes in at $360,000, does it get split down the middle at $380,000, or who wins that negotiation? Just watching that for, let's just say, 6 to 12 months, you're going to get a sense of, is a absurd credit for a roof, for example, going to be allowed or given, or will they be told to take a hike? So it really just depends on what's happening in those negotiations over a period of time to determine or advise your client, hey, you should ask for this or you shouldn't.
well, that brings up a good point then. How do you, because you work mostly with sellers, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you talk to your client when this offer comes in and all of a sudden they're asking for this amount of money? You think it's absurd. And how do you advise your client? And furthermore, how do you get that information where it's absurd? How do you get to an agreement with the other agent so they can communicate with their client?
I mean, knowing what things actually cost is really big. I mean,
Oh my God, yes.
Well, right, the realities of it. And I mean, the silly part of this conversation is just the same way I'm pulling market data. It takes me 15, 20 minutes a month to pull these numbers and talk to my clients about what's going on in Chicago and each market. You know, you can Google information these days pretty easily. Can we all agree on that? Are you Googling what the cost of a roof is per square foot? Are you doing the calculation? I mean, I personally think agents are not going out and seeking these types of information, whether it be market data or construction costs, out of pure laziness. It's really what I think is like the biggest problem. If you took the time to obtain the information and properly communicate it to your own client, I think a lot of these transactions will go a lot smoother.
So let me add to that a little bit. You know, I use one thing in our business that we do is we do follow-up Zoom calls with our clients. And I do that personally. And usually everything comes back down to how much and who pays, all right? Or even if it's worth fixing in the first place. But everybody wants to know how much is it going to cost and who's going to end up paying for it. Well, the first one I could help them with, and I know there's a couple of different versions of this same company, but I use a company called HomeWise. And I love looking at Patrick's face every time I say that because he dislikes another company called HomeWise that does a little bit different. But HomeWise does a pretty gosh darn good job at keeping all the numbers for construction costs by square footage, linear footage. You're nodding your head no.
No. I'm saying no because in a good thing. Like, wow, like this website should be shared with the entire agent population for a place to go to.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we were talking about information too much and too little, as if to say, right, like maybe long inspection reports can be a little confusing for people, as if to say, you know what, I want nothing to do with this. So if we can have a place like HomeWise for an entire industry to go to say, hey guys, here's the black and white. Can we stop asking 20 grand for a $2,000 cost? Can we get down to reality on the same page and obtaining information from the same place so we can get back to what we're really talking about? I love it.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm having these negotiations, whether it be on typically it'll be on the buyer side when I'm thinking about these things, you'll start off, you'll send your whatever it is, your obscene demand, and then the seller will come back with something completely underwhelming. And it's like, okay, so where do we go from here? Do I just double down on whatever my demand was and not provide anything more? Or am I going to instead provide some additional data? Because to me, it's an underwhelming negotiation tactic to just say, well, you said that, but I want more, and trying to just go back and forth, feeling around in the dark. All right, so what does this thing cost? Should we get a plumber out there to get a quote on something? As often as not, I'll either say, you need to talk to the inspector about, how important this one particular thing is. Or if this is paramount to you, let's get the particular professional out there. Because what the inspector will say is, this is a potential issue. You should have a plumber, electrician, a roofer, whatever look at it.
Not all of them will say that, but I get it. Most of us do.
That's usually what I get. Yeah. And so it's, the one that is, that sticks in my mind is possible mold. Okay, so possible mold to a buyer is, oh my God, there's mold and it's toxic and my whole family's going to die 6 months in. To a seller, possible mold means you saw something black.
Yeah, give me a sponge and some bleach and I'll wash this thing off.
Yeah, the word possible is it means something
that
so
is
different
like
to buyers and sellers.
Folklore in our business that just drives me nuts, and they're still teaching us, the new inspectors today. Can't say mold. It's a 4-letter word. You have to say possible mold. I'm like, malarkey, I'm going to
culture
say
getting into the inspection business?
Oh, big time.
Wow.
Like there's no tomorrow, And
Jeez.
I'm like, if it's mold, it's mold. So what? It doesn't cost that much to clean up. That's the case. So if you think it is, who cares if it isn't or isn't? Clean it up. Well, Stop the water.
That gets into deeper conversations. Is bleach and a sponge sufficient, or do I need the whole hazmat team to come in? And again, a buyer and a seller are going to have totally different ideas about what it's going to take to remediate that mold. Possible mold, excuse me.
No, but you also have to add in, right? You brought up about the furnaces, Well, now are we replacing this thing with a simple carrier, which I have in my house? I think it's just fine. Or are they going to go with a train, which is American made? It's more expensive. And I don't know, same thing. We got 50-year shingles that we could put on a roof, or we got 15 year shingles that we could put on a roof. What and there is a dramatic price difference.
But as I think Patrick talked about, people would rather talk about how they feel about things rather than what they actually are. Well, I mean, I have the conversation all the time. Well, I just feel that this property needs a lot of work, Ryan. I just feel that the furnace is at the end of its life, Ryan, right? What, can you please base your negotiation or what you're asking for on fact rather than what you think or feel? I mean, it seems like a silly thing that we're even having this discussion right now, but it's a massive part of this conversation and when these deals are or are not staying together.
Yeah.
So HomeWise, for example, I think is a wonderful place that should be shared with the entire industry so we can all get clear as to what we're actually talking about and discussing monetary value on.
And it's not the only source out there. I know one of the companies we work with is called Porch, and they're trying to come into the market with competing with Angie's List, Home Advisor, Yelp, the contract referrals. So they have people that they vet, and they're able to see what the cost is for those areas. So they're another good source.
Well, okay, fine. But here's me as a listing agent, and I get a attorney letter on Monday that's asking for some crazy thing. Should I take HomeWise and just send the link?
Why not?
To the buyer's agent to say, hey, guys, I appreciate you wanting to try to get the best deal on this house and negotiate every penny, rip it out of my client's pocket. But can we just look over this website really quickly so we can be on the same page as to what we're talking about? So thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. And if you ever need help navigating it, because it is a pain in the butt, if you ever need help navigating it, let me know.
It's like every
there to
website.
coach.
You gotta sink your teeth into it to really learn how to use it.
There's always going to be a learning curve and a learning process with everything that we do.
HomeWise, it's a great website, but a pain in the butt.
No, God almighty, I could
So are
see
these
a
deals.
cease and desist letter coming real soon.
Yeah, no,
On this one right here.
I love how we're talking about this approach because if when you distill it down to something real as opposed to the feelings of it, to me that's where you can start to make progress. And look, it's you're not just going to be able to wave a magic wand and say, look, HomeWise says this, and so your position is untenable. A buyer may still say, no, I don't like what you had to say, and that's okay too. But you're still going to get, in my opinion, better results when you actually have something that you can point at that is more objective than, well, I just feel like it's this or that.
Or as a listing agent, I mean, I'm asking myself right now, what can I even present to my own seller to help them get clear with this angered conversation, negotiation that we're going over right now? Like if I can present it to them and say, hey, here's the data, I'm going to show it to you. Does this request seem reasonable based on what we're looking at here? And then they can make that decision more clearly.
I think that's the real talent. What you just mentioned right there when it comes to real estate professionals is not making people angry. All right, because when they get emotional, our brains, this is a physical thing, our brains cannot think logically when we are emotional, all right? Which is why if you ever listen to like Air Traffic Controller, that movie Sully, when it crashed, you listen to these guys. And my brother-in-law, who is an F-16 fighter pilot, and, he's like really pissed off at something, but when he talks, he's like cool, calm, you can't not tell that he's upset at all. He maintains composure with that because he knows that he can't think straight if he lets his emotions get to him. So how do you coach, advise your client and keep them from getting into that emotional state or that angry state so that we can make good, rational decisions and give everybody the end game, which is a transaction?
Tonality is important. Like this right now.
I know I'm getting worked up hard. I hear. I'll shut up a little.
I tend to just ask questions that are pertaining to their own motivation, where they want to be. Right? Is this $3,000 credit worth keeping you from getting the $500,000 and moving your money to Florida? Is this furnace really worth not moving you and your kids to a larger home where you want to be? Right? Like. That's the kind of question is putting things kind of side by side to say, is this, all worth it or not? And only they can make that decision, but I'm just kind of proposing it rather than letting the attorney letter or inspection report get them more angry. Our job is to kind of simplify it and break it down for them and just reflect on why are we doing this?
Yeah, and I'll just add in part of my process is when I'm representing a seller. So I get the letter in, and let's face it, attorneys, our tools are blunt instruments, and we don't really have the luxury of sugarcoating things or trying to necessarily sell things in a subtle way. Subtlety is not what you're looking for from your lawyer typically. So I'll get that letter in and I'll take a quick look at it, and it will be something that is inevitably going to inflame my seller. And so you say, look, I got this 27 paragraph attorney review letter, which unfortunately is fairly common.
27?
Yes, they're getting longer as time
Don't get
goes
me
on.
started. And every year I look at my form letter and I try to cut out as much as possible because so much of it's already addressed in the contract. I'm getting off on a tangent, but
Oh,
Get
thank you.
off,
Thank you
run.
for shorter ones. I
oh my
appreciate
God,
it.
I when I see this 27-page ones and it's like, represent and warrant this, represent and warrant that. It's like, you can ask those questions. You can ask the seller if they've had water in the last 10 years. And that answer is going to be worth about as much as those words are worth because sellers have selective memories. They have bad memories. And even a few of them are just, they don't want to talk about the thing that happened 5 years ago where they got a foot of water in the basement. But that's kind of a different subject entirely. But you'll get the handful of requests from the buyer, and you kind of do a little calculation in your head and you say, look, this is what they're asking for. I know this is a lot. It's not where we're going to end up. We're going to talk about this, and it's not going to stop them from reacting to whatever's in that letter because people are going to react. That's what your mind does. You see the letter, you go, oh my God, they're asking for a $10,000 credit. And at the very least, I try to start the dialogue between myself, the client, and bringing the agent in. And you say, this is what they're asking for, but this isn't where we need to then respond off of that. We're going to do our own evaluation of what they're asking for. Is this a $10,000 list? No, it's not. It's more like a $750 list. And am I exaggerating? Not really. That happens all the time. Where does that come from? 9 times out of 10, what the seller will say is, "Isn't that interesting?" Because the buyer really didn't want to budge off of my bottom price, which was $10,000 above. I'm sorry, which was $10,000 above what their top price was, and then they went up 10,000. All of a sudden, we've got a 10,000 ask on the inspection. You're nodding your head. You've seen this before.
Yeah, greed always kicks in.
So then we go, all right, cool. At least we know why this has come in. It's not going to go anywhere near there, but we can have that be the conversation we're having with the seller client rather than being, here's the letter, go off, get nuts, and draw your own conclusions. Charlie, one of your favorite things is expectations.
It is.
And we can make sure that the client at least understands that I'm not sending this to you because I'm in agreement with it or whatever. I'm sending this to you because this is what the buyer's request is, and now we're going to do our job and make sure that it becomes a reasonable agreement, assuming we can get there.
You just brought to my mind here how my business and my interaction with clients is so much different than yours. Mostly it's because I get paid when I do the job. All right. So when that inspection's completed, I got a check in my hand. If they don't buy the house, I still have that check. I got paid already.
That's nice.
You two don't. And in fact, Joey doesn't either, I don't think. So I get paid right up front. And then if they go ahead and buy another house, yeah, they're going to be paying me again. And no, I don't give discounts for multiple time coming around if you didn't want to buy it. But, what I just heard with this $10,000 thing coming in here, and this is where I have to kind of ask both of you again because I'm really curious. If you don't do what that client wants you to do, will they fire you?
Listen, the client is in charge. Okay, this is
That's
their
fair.
transaction. So something I will tell my clients is, look, my role is as an advisor. I don't make any decisions here. I will give you my opinion. I might have strong opinions about it, but if you then say to me, I appreciate your advice, I appreciate what you're telling me, however, I want to do something else, that's what we're doing, presuming it is both legal and ethical. It would be more likely under such circumstances that if a client were to ask me to do something that I genuinely thought could get them or me in trouble, I might fire them.
Okay.
But I'm not going to get fired over telling a client they can't do something that they want to do, and it is, legal and ethical to do. That's not my role.
Ryan, what about you? Somebody says that, I want you to give me a $10,000 credit, and it's not going to happen. Do you just go through the motions?
I mean, you have to. I agree 100% with everything Patrick's just said. Now, the question is, a lot of times I would say the other side does the talking for me, so to speak, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, as if to say again, I'm always on the list side. So if a buyer asks for a $10,000 credit and my client, my seller says, you know what, I'm not giving him a dime. Well, I have to convey that. I have to send that message.
And that's a legal thing, isn't it? That's a by law thing.
And
You're the
representation,
messenger.
and yes, to go back to your initial question of do I run the threat of getting fired? Of course, right? Well, it's my house, and you're going to do what I told you to do. Before I deliver the take a hike zero counter offer to the $10,000 credit, I do run through the inspection items, the roof, whatever it is, and say, here, based on what we know, that's a very common phrase I use, is what we know in our industry, in this whole thing we call real estate, is this is really where this should be. I agree with you that $10,000, it seems absurd, and I agree with you that it is. But based on the data, this is where this counteroffer should be. So let me ask you this. Would you be open to just throwing in maybe $2,000 to get this deal done and move on and get to closing? And then I just leave it there. That's typically it. And again, my $2,000 is no different than a counteroffer when I get an offer on the listing initially, right? As if to say, well, we got a $400,000 home, we get an offer at $360,000, and 100% of the time, my seller asks me, well, Ryan, what do you think? Well,
I love it.
If you're my client and I'm saying, well, I don't know, well, what do you want to do? Well, then I'm not doing my job, am I?
Right.
Based on the market, based on activity, based on recent closings, I would recommend coming back with an offer of $395,000. Would you like me to go ahead and deliver that counter now?
So why is it then, this is another pet peeve of mine, and maybe you don't know the answer. Why are some real estate agents so hands-off when it comes to and attorneys too? I'm going to bash both you two. All right. Why are some attorneys hands-off when it comes to these things and real estate agents? They just let everything go wherever it goes, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I mean, if you're that hands-off as an agent, it probably means that you lack the experience, I would suppose, to give meaningful, actionable advice. Or perhaps you work with a lawyer that is very involved and doesn't want you to be involved.
I've seen those too.
Yeah.
They're not easy to work with.
Most lawyers, probably including myself. We all have a list of people that can't stand us. I'm sure, I hope that list isn't too long on my hand, but hey, it's a hazard of the industry. But
I'm snickering now because the only thing that came to my mind was that Seinfeld episode. Hey, can't stand you. Get over here.
Well, we just did have Festivus.
For the rest of us, absolutely.
People have different styles. There are some agents who, I'll try to engage them in that part of the process, the inspection and attorney review, and they go, hey, I've handed it off to you. It's your baby at this point. And I go, okay. Not my favorite way to handle things, but I'll work within the parameters. I can't force someone to be involved, intimately involved in those conversations. You just have to kind of take things as they come as far as, who has what style. You cannot really force a particular style on most people, I don't think.
Patrick, how do people get hold of you if they want to ask you more questions?
Down below, if you're watching this, here is my number. If you're listening, that was very much a visual gag, and you will not get it. 773-632-8330. Call or text.
All right, Joey, we're kind of leaving you out of the conversation. I love for you to chime in, and I think you're paying attention to the text messages. And I know my lovely son, he's over here trying to ask you some questions about negotiating stuff. But if people want to get hold of you, Joey, how do they do that?
Well, you can get a hold of me at 630-235-2405 or across all social media platforms at the VA Loan Nerd.
All right, and I want to come back to you, Joey, dealing with Christopher's question here. But real quick, Ryan, how do they get hold of you?
My direct office line is 312-888-9395.
All right, and Joey, going back to you, what's the difference, or what is allowable, when it comes to credits or repairs and things like that? Is there a certain limit to things that you can get with regards to the mortgage?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, we've been throwing this $10,000 number back and forth, but for a little context, as a lender, we have to make sure that it is a acceptable credit/concession. So, depending on how much you're putting down on a conventional loan, we're limited to 3, 6, or 9%, right? So, if you're putting less than 10% down, we can do 3% credit as max. If you're putting under 25% down, we can do 6%. If you're putting more than 25, we can do 9%. Now, obviously, you're going to exceed closing costs if you're doing a 9% credit. So what we do with the overage is we can buy down your rate significantly. I would say probably at that point 6 points, which is an insane amount of rate buy down. On FHA, you got to stay under 6%. On VA, which is the most friendly, in my opinion, you can do 4% in concessions, which you can use to pay off debt, which helps you qualify for residual income purposes and cover all closing costs. So 4% in concessions along with all closing costs. It's So it's all based on the purchase price of the house, not the loan amount. So that's also a big game changer when people talk about concessions and credit limits.
And the purchase price is not the listing price, right?
That is correct. It is the number that is on the contract. So if the listing price is $300 and you're buying for $280, that sale price is $280, and that's what we base our concession and credit limits off of, percentage-wise.
Outstanding. And Ryan, how do you explain that to your clients, whether it be buyers or sellers? How do you get them to, I don't want to say get around the credit numbers and stuff like that, but what happens when the numbers are higher than that? What do we do?
Well, are you talking about like how I can get a seller to understand a 3 or 4% credit? Is that what you mean?
That, and what happens if they want to get more than that credit?
Well, in terms of, as an agent, I mean, we can only do what the lenders allow us to. But how I speak to my sellers with that is really I just use the word net, right? And when they have a $400,000 purchase price with a 3% credit, well, it's the same as selling your home for $388 net. So does $388 net seem okay with you? Because most of them throw their, get all upset saying, I'm not giving them $12,000, right? So helping them understand what their bottom line is and what the actual numbers are at closing helps them understand that better.
And this stuff, all of this conversation is just really bringing it to focus for me how important it is that the various professionals working on these transactions need to work together. I mean, this team is greater than the sum of its parts. And when you have people siloed off, when the agent and the attorney aren't talking and they're not communicating with the lender, this is where this is how you're going to get unnecessary friction in your transaction. If you're not utilizing your inspector as the resource that they can be, you're injecting unnecessary friction into your transaction. When people are communicating, working together, when I know that I need to call Joey before I click the button on an agreement on a credit, when I know I need to talk to Ryan before I send off a really harsh letter on this, that, or the other thing, if I don't talk to him and I send it, again, we're using this $10,000 number. I don't want people to think that this is a commonplace thing. It's just an easy number to throw out there and use as illustratively. I don't know if that's a word.
It's an example.
It is now.
But if I do that before talking to Ryan, and Ryan says, "Hey, look, we got a fantastic deal on this. We're $25,000 under market. Tread lightly on the inspection stuff." That's going to change the entire. It's going to change. change the entire focus of how we're dealing with this. This is all such important information that everyone needs to be communicating.
And you said it earlier today. I mean, between the buyer, the agent, and the buyer's attorney, that should certainly be a three-way conversation, and certainly on the list side too.
Without a doubt.
During AI, or attorney inspection, sorry, and is often not. And I think I said this earlier, how we'll do an inspection on Friday on my listing, and then I'll get an attorney cancellation letter by noon. And I'll call the buyer's agent right away and say, what happened? I thought things went well on Friday. What's going on? And the 50% of the time, the answer I get is, I don't know. I'll have to call you back.
And what's your response to something like that? I mean,
Well,
why wouldn't they
here's
know?
the thing. I have no control on what happens on the other side. The question I have to ask myself is, what do I need to do differently to help facilitate? And
Which is a good question.
the changes I'm making for 2023 are making a point of picking up the phone on Friday after the inspection and saying, what things do we need to be concerned about? And curious, what kind of relationship, Mr. Buyer's agent, do you have with the attorney on this deal? Is he going to be a tough guy on Monday and start sending out letters, or, what's that going to look like? And that way we can kind of prep ourselves, and they can be sure they're having that three-way conversation on Friday before things get ugly on Monday.
I mean,
Yeah.
I hear what you guys are saying, and I agree. Ultimately, it's going to be the home buyers. It's their money, their future home, their family's going to be living there. They deserve that to make that decision. However, everybody in this room, we're also the advisors to them, and we should be giving good, accurate advice so they can make good home buying decisions. Am I being on a soapbox talking like that, or am I?
Which I think the foundation of this conversation was data-driven, right? Is if to say we've got the data to help not only our clients, but also our peers,
Why we're advising.
right?
Exactly.
Like, can
and
you
that
do-
goes to everybody else.
Yeah, there are times when a deal can be saved, but it requires a phone call. And if that phone call never gets made, so if I get one of these letters that Ryan described on a Monday morning, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to forward it to my client. I'm going to say, look, we got one of these letters. There's not much we can do about it. However, I'm going to suggest that the agent reach out to the other agent and see what's going on. Is this something that can be saved? I'd say, maybe 1 out of 5 times, all of a sudden we're back in business after that conversation happens. And if you don't have the experience, if you don't know to do that, then deals are going to fall apart that don't necessarily need to.
Well, I know I get passionate every time we talk about these things, so if I got my voice up in a dander, please accept my forgiveness. Or please give me your forgiveness. Sorry about that.
I accept your
But
forgiveness.
we are running out of time. So once real quickly, please, around the horn, we got about a half of a minute. First of all, thank you, Devin Tingle. He's our producer of this show and makes us do as good as we do. I want to give a special shout out to my favorite father-in-law, Bernie. He's my only father-in-law. Ryan, how do people get hold of you?
I'm Ryan Casper over at Keller Williams. My direct line, 312-888-9395.
Patrick, please.
All right, listen to this at 2x slowdown 773-632-8330.
Say it again correctly.
773-632-8330.
And Joey, closing.
Yep, Joey Matthews, the VA Loan Nerd on all social media, 630-235-2405, and thevaloannerd.com.
And my name is Charlie. I want to thank you for listening. WCPT AM 820, and I am out.